Hello and welcome to Catholic Unscripted. I'm Catherine Bennett.
I'm Mark Lambert.
Can you hear me all right, Mark?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I've got it on YouTube and it's just come up. I think it's just come up in the background. How you doing?
Oh, I'm good. Are we go? We're still making our way with the lives, just getting to grips with how they function. But you should be able to see it up now. And welcome to all of you who've joined us. We have a few people here in the comments. Thank you for joining us. Sebastian, Anne, Lindsay, Lou, familiar names, Frangipani, Dermot. Some of these I think aren't real names, Mark. Dermot, our friend Daryl, and a few others. So thank you very much for joining us. We've got quite a list to get through today. And the first thing we do is point to our written articles, because there's quite a few to look at. If you haven't already, do take a look at catholicunscripted.com. And Mark, you wrote a wonderful reflection, because we're just back from France, having spent the last, my daughter's been in my office for the whole time I've been away, using it for her work. So it's full of her work paraphernalia and everything's moved around. So I have to reconfigure it for my work. So we've been in France, we're just back, and you wrote a lovely reflection. Do you want to point our viewers to that?
Yeah, shall I pull it up on the jobby on the screen? Let me see if I can share my screen. Yeah, we were walking through the like all of the towns have got Hotel de Ville. If you've been to France, then you know that, which is the little picture you can see there. That's of a Hotel de Ville where we were staying, and obviously it's emblazoned with the motto Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité. And I was just, sort of thinking about how that has worked out for France and what it's meant for France. And I think the work that we've done together, some of the things that we've talked about, it's sort of kind of your speciality in a way, but I was kind of thinking, you see this, there's a lot of talk about resurgence of the faith in Europe, and especially in France, there's a massive resurgence in certain areas. But my experience over the last 20 years has been of going into little local churches, and there's very few people at mass or whatever. And there might be an African priest who in Morzine, for example, is somewhere that I've been quite regularly over the years in the French Alps. And it seems extremely out of place to have this African guy, but obviously it's the fruit of the missions, thanks be to God, coming back and evangelizing ancient France. But what amazes me is that, like, after writing this piece and sort of passing on all these anecdotes and then tracing the philosophy to trying to see, like, really how barren that philosophy is, Catherine. Do you know what I mean? That you can see what they're pursuing, you can see what they've tried to pursue, but it's gone absolutely nowhere. And it's that old idea, that we see time and time again, if you study history, that mankind builds the Tower of Babel, thinks he's got the better answers. And I think especially the Genesis analogy was pertinent, that you've got this, the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. And that's literally what the revolution and French philosophy has been about, is that we don't need God. We can figure it out for ourselves. And then it all falls
around that time that, sorry to interrupt, but just it's pertinent. Around that time, we have the Romantic movement. Again, all of this is in the milieu of the French Revolution, which literally, like Lord Byron and Shelley, these figures are busy creating origin stories, even to the extent of, like, Sithna creating these origin stories, which actually defend the devil as a good guy, as a treated unjustly. So that's all part of it. I think that's a key thing that you said there. Sorry to interrupt, about actually changing the origin.
Yeah, so I was just thinking through some of those ideas, really. And then, of course, we went to Mass last Sunday together, and we walked into this amazing little church. It was full of young families. They had the traditional Mass, and they had a French priest. You just think, oh, wow, that there are pockets. It is alive. And I thought it was almost like, oh, scratch everything I said. the faith is still alive.
Whoops. Too late. Do read that. It's a fantastic article, and you can get that over on catholicunscripted.com. Daryl, it's very nice of you to say we're back looking tanned. I think it's fair to say I'm looking burnt, not tanned, but I'll take the compliment anyway. I never go brown, I only go red, such is my Irish complexion. And Mark, you're looking pretty good and your hair's growing back, apparently. So thank you for your comments. A reminder that we're live, firstly, to catch up, have a conversation, see what's been happening in the news over the past week or so in the Catholic world, and also to answer any questions you have, and for you to share your comments with us and with one another. We have got also some people email us in advance with some questions, so we do have some questions in advance, which we'll get to in just a moment. Some of you are asking about Gavin. You will have seen on the email he's doing his own homilies or non-homilies reflections on his channel, as always. So you can find them over there. Just visit Gavin Ashenden on his YouTube channel, and you can imagine the demands of a running this when we're not really near one another. Proximity is not always easy, but we all have the same aim, which is to share the good news, to work in his service, and we continue to support and direct people to one another so that we can continue to do that. Anyway, so he's done some great work for us and will continue to do some great work, and hopefully you will be able to get all of that. So someone asking about March for Life. Yes, we'll be there again, God willing. We'll be there. Mark, I think your family are going, or some of you, whoever's able to go. That's certainly the plan for us. So we hope to see people there marching for life again, bumping into some familiar faces and names. Bruce, we'll see you there. We saw you there last year. If you are going or planning to go, do pop over and say hello. You might see me running up and down as they did last year with a live, with my phone, trying to record live from the march. So we'll do that. And on to some questions. Keep your questions coming and your comments. Mark, I'm going to start by just a nice simple one. Are we all going to go to heaven? This is a question that's often asked, and in fact, a topic on which the Pope commented just recently. So to those wondering, do we all get to go to heaven? What's the response?
Well, there was obviously, this is quite a controversial thing that Pope Francis dabbled with, and made some controversial statements. It is, I think, the most common heresy that we see. Jesus mentions hell more than he mentions heaven in the Gospels, in a way that warns us that our salvation, we have to be careful, and keep our lamps full of oil and our wicks trimmed. And Pope Francis was prone to sort of saying that all religions are the path to heaven, and some strange things like that, which some people tried to say, oh, he didn't really mean that, and probably didn't really mean it. But anyway, maybe it was just a poor way of putting it. But Pope Leo has very strongly came out and I think it's really important to put it in his missionary context, as a priest who went to South America as a missionary from North America, that Jesus is the only way. I mean, it's brilliant because his papacy is very Christocentric. We see that from the beginning. He mentioned Christ a lot straight off the bat, and that's really encouraging. So he's come out quite clearly and said that that Jesus is the door, is the only way to eternal life, and that's comforting for the Pope is a Catholic.
It's your sort of bare minimum, isn't it, Mark?
Well, you'd have thought so, but obviously after the 12 years we've had, it seemed like anything was possible at a few points, didn't it? So, but no, it is I think really sort of comforting to hear so many, obviously Catholic things. So Leo said, the answer is perfectly clear and has resounded throughout history for 2,000 years. Jesus alone comes to save us. and no one else, because only he has the power. He is Almighty God himself, and because he loves us. St. Peter said it emphatically. There is no other name under heaven given to men by which we must be saved. Acts 4:12. Never forget these words, dear friends. Engrave them on your hearts and put Jesus at the center of your lives. That is pretty good stuff, isn't it? And he
Really
said
good, yeah.
that to the national pilgrimage of altar servers, right? Now, I don't know, there was a reminder on Rurata Caeli. I'll see if I can quickly find it, of what he did with what Pope Francis did with altar servers. And the reminder was when he found that, there was an altar server who was serving him, a young lad, and Francis made fun of him for having his hands clenched like they were glued together, which, was just one of a number of things where I found myself going, what? What are you talking about? And so this is really lovely. He gave this wonderful, encouraging talk to altar servers. And there's lots of really good pictures of that as well. So I might even post a few on the website if guys are interested.
Are you bringing that up? Or
well, just looking for that. They did a little
you
juxtaposition.
have 2 seconds.
It was a few. Oh, here we go. Yeah, I've got it. Okay. Let me just share. Share screen.
Let's have a look.
There we go. Okay, here it comes. Here it comes.
Drums are rolling.
It's quite a while, doesn't it? Between there's a lot of clicking to go on. So you can see here. This is Rurata Caeli's feed, and you've got this. So Rurata Caeli, if you don't know, they're a sort of traditionalist website. They really are good with information at predicting who is good and who's bad. So like Pope Francis, they had him pegged as soon as he came out, really, and everything they said was true. So it was a really good news source. But here it says, Leo 14th to French altar servers. Dear friends, I thank you for your commitment. You are doing the parish a great and generous service. I encourage you to preserve faithfully when you approach the altar. Always keep in mind the greatness and holiness of what is being celebrated. Mass is a time of celebration and joy. How indeed can we not have joy in our hearts in the presence of Jesus? But Mass is also a serious, solemn moment marked by gravity. May your attitude, your silence, the dignity of your service, the beauty of the liturgy, the order and majesty of the gestures draw the faithful into the sacred grandeur of the mystery. I also hope that you will be attentive to the call that Jesus may address to you to follow him more closely in the priesthood. So making a wonderful link there between the priesthood and altar serving, which is what the whole point of it is.
It should be. Yeah.
I address myself to your young, enthusiastic and generous consciences, and I'm about to tell you that something that you need to hear, even if you may cause you some concern. The shortage of priests in France and throughout the world is a great misfortune, a misfortune for the church. May you, little by little, Sunday after Sunday, discover the beauty, the happiness and the necessity of such a vocation. What a wonderful life that of the priest who at the heart of each of his days encounters Jesus in such an exceptional way and gives him to the world. Just beautiful words.
Wonderful.
And like fabulous pictures there of all these altar servers. How wonderful that must have been for them compared to this one, which was Francis mocking this altar boy who had his hands together. What must that have done to that young lad? Just atrocious.
Yeah, that's really encouraging stuff. It's good to see. And the comments chime with some other comments that Pope Leo's made in his rejection of Pachamama. We'll all remember that. Who could forget? In a meeting of bishops gathered in Bogota about the Amazon. Listen, he said some things here that I thought were just brilliant for this time that we're living in now. On the one hand, we don't want to say who cares about our environment, pollute it as much as you want. But on the other, you don't want to idolize the environment, which is where we see the leanings in the modern world. And we're sort of longing for a pope to come out and give a really good sound teaching on the environment that speaks to our role as stewards of the earth, but without idolizing Mother Nature. And in this meeting, I'll ask you a bit about that in a moment, this rejection of Pachamama. he talked about defending nature, but without falling into the cult of nature, to safeguard the goods of creation without becoming their captives. This is all good stuff. And then says the Amazon does not find its meaning in itself, but in Christ. I think that's just perfect, isn't it? It's brilliant. I know you and I have been talking about a program, a program of I can't remember the name of it now, but it's about the Hawaiian Islands.
Oh yeah,
And
Chief of War.
that's it, Chief of War. This is people have been writing about this program. There's a few episodes, and I haven't seen them all. But I was saying to you, all of these instincts are instincts because they're waiting for Christ. It's about the incarnation. It's about turning to Christ, in whom all things can be one. But not in itself. You don't find your identity in the nature itself. So this, I think, was a healing moment, I'd say, even, wouldn't you, in response to that those awful Pachamama scenes?
Yeah, and it's been widely reported, which has been really a good thing. This was I did a report on it, which again is on our website, and everyone can check it out there. And it starts off with the problem that Pachamama caused, and here you've got a picture of Pope Francis with other bishops in the Vatican garden with this like weird prayer service. That wasn't the weirdest thing that happened with the Pachamama thing, but it was just one thing. And I think I say in the article, even if you took the best possible interpretation of what went on, you'd say it was extremely unwise thing to do, and caused untold problems and worry for the faithful. And so here you've got an example of how Leo is healing that. How he's not, as we've often, people often say, oh, well, he should come out and just condemn Pachamama, and but like he's not doing that. He's not causing a confrontation or a rupture in the papacy. He's just bringing clarity, and please God that goes on. Let's see it with all the other messes that Pope Francis made. But it's interesting, the ones that he's picking out, and as the opportunities arise, he's been very clear. I mean, that is very clearly a condemnation of that sort of syncretism, which we saw with Pope Francis, like adopting these pagan idols and pretending that they're it's all the same thing. Yeah, Mr. B is right.
Yeah, Mr. B, thank you. We want to turn to your comments and your questions, so keep them coming. Try and pick out some here. The Gospel Sunday, Narrowgate. Thank you, John B. Yeah, Gavin's done a lovely little reflection, which you can find on his channel, about this idea of a nice Jesus. So do take a look at that. And I do think so. Daryl's saying, I do think Leo will be a good healer. He's good at that. So that's promising. And then we've got a question. Here you go, Mark. Is it true that Egyptian locusts are in southwest England? It's getting a bit apocalyptic in this age.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a new one on me. I know we've got Asian hornets, but I didn't know anything about Egyptian locusts. I hadn't seen that.
Asian hornets and Egyptian locusts. Leo speaks in a way so as not to divide people. That's quite interesting as well, from Drew Black. Because we know we've lived through a very divisive papacy. Talking of which, Mark, Pope Leo met with Cardinal Burke just recently, and people are saying this is part of a healing between this division that seemed to, this chasm that grew wider under Francis of the traditionalists, and it smacks more of this hermeneutic of continuity.
It's really interesting at where Peter is, which is the sort of papolatry website of Pope Francis, run by Mike Lewis, who really, to me, embodies the spirit of Francis, which is a spirit of rupture and a spirit of, tribalism and all this sort of thing. When Francis met Burke, there was like 4 pages dedicated to it. When when Leo meets Burke, there's nothing. It's not even reported on. And that is obvious tribalism, isn't it? Because Leo is obviously repairing those fractures. And he's done this. This is not the first meeting he's had with Cardinal Burke. So Cardinal Burke was the head of the Apostolica Signatura, which is basically the head of the the canon law, head of canon law for the whole church. He's a canon lawyer and an amazing scholar and priest. I've had the great pleasure of meeting him. He's not the greatest orator in the world, I would say. The actual material that he says is wonderful, but he's not a particularly gifted orator. But not all of us are. But at the same time, incredibly valuable servant of the church. And Pope Francis, again, he was another person that in the church that Pope Francis actually ridiculed, as well as ostracizing him, removing him from a number of different roles. It sort of seemed to really have it in for him from the very beginning of his papacy. And by stark contrast, Pope Leo has had several meetings with him. We've got it fairly good authority that in that meeting, Cardinal Burke raised the point of Traditionis Custodes, of the restricting of the traditional Latin Mass that Pope Francis undertook, which was, I don't think anyone would disagree that it wasn't disgraceful. I thought it was absolutely disgraceful. And so this is the first meeting that's actually been publicized by the Vatican, and they've issued pictures, etc., etc. So, and in the interim, also, Pope Leo wrote to Cardinal Burke in Latin, interestingly, thanking him for his wonderful ministry, his faithfulness to the church and to Christ. Now, to me, like, that is beautiful. That's what should be going on. And it seems such a healing sort of process. And now he's met him again. It gives you real hope that something is going to happen about Traditionis Custodes. And I think it's a really positive sign.
Yeah, lots of good things and positive signs.
Did you see that one?
There are, yeah, I did.
From the Raw Food Gardener. And this is one of the problems, like that comes up in the parish. What's the point of girl altar servers? Like, what's the point of having inclusive altar serving? All it does is make the boys stop want to doing it, and
but also it says
it affects vocations.
Yeah, it does, but it suggests that the girls are serving as a kind of it brings it back to that kind of equality. You started off by talking about the French Revolution and about those sort of idols, and it's saying actually what we want to do is to try and give girls an equal opportunity, equal opportunities, rather than about service and preparation for vocation to the priesthood. And it's not that girls can't have a role. I know a number of parishes where the boys will serve or perhaps be members of the choir, and the girls can be members of the choir or be in the Sodality of Mary. It's not that there aren't things for the young women and things for the young men, but they're different things. And if we see that in church, we're saying we're not the same, but we're equally valuable. But if we just say what matters is equality of opportunity, and girls can play football and boys can play football, and girls can serve at the altar and boys can serve at the altar, it sort of makes it just a mundane task. And anyone can do a mundane task. You just say, well, you're human, you've got a brain, do this. And it takes away that vocational kind of training and meaning. So it's a shame. I'm sorry to hear you've got mostly girls.
It's an expression of our teleology, isn't it? And
exactly.
So we're not doing it. Yeah, and this is the problem. Like, exactly.
And the same thing.
Yeah, it's a false anthropology, and it leads through, and there's all kinds of problems.
Yeah, and it's not insignificant. I think, just to say, it might seem like, what are you whinging for? There's no women priests. This is a nice compromise. But there shouldn't be compromise, because all things follow. It's like we've often talked about contraception. If we can't understand the trans movement or other things like the madness we've got to, if we can't see a link between that and the sexual revolution and contraception, then we're missing something. So don't assume that there is no relationship between girl altar servers and then some of the other madnesses that are going on, and our loss of the telos. Absolutely right, Mark. It's the right word. Like, what is that? Why have we been created as we have been created? For what end? And keep our eyes fixed on that. And things like that in the church, and the roles in the church, and the liturgy in the church teaches us. It gives meaning, and helps us understand that telos. So we mess around with that, and we're sort of capitulating to the culture, which we really shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, and
Sorry,
we've got
you brought up
better
something else.
answers. We've got better
Yeah,
answers. And that's what, if we're not sticking to those, sort of basic principles, then we're
yeah,
not explaining, that it's not didactic. And that's what I've really missed from that, like the coherent message of the church is didactic just in and of itself. And but it's sort of osmotic, isn't it? Like it explains itself by what it is and what it does. And some of these little fractures that we've made in an attempt to be more inclusive or something, or more, look, we're more like secular society or whatever, they
yeah,
just destroy the telos. They, and ultimately mean that all that teaching that's gone into it is all lost somehow.
yeah, yeah. Good to see. Carolyn says no girl altar servers at the FSSP. Sometimes as many as 8 boys, though. In my parish, we have a lot of boys, but what's wonderful is there are so many families, big families. So you've got some families with 8 boys, some with 6 boys and a few girls, and some with. So you might have 12 or 15 altar servers, but they're all drawn from just a couple of families because they've all got so many boys.
Yeah,
Right, what have you got there?
well, so Lindsay's just asking about the flag thing. When we were driving back from France, we were getting all excited when we crossed the channel, because as soon as we got into Kent, all the flags, Union Jacks and the Cross of St George were up on the bridges. And it is a really nice thing to see, because it makes you feel, it gives you that sense of national pride. And our American viewers and might not understand, that might sound like a bit of a strange thing, but we have had this march through the institutions here, which is sort of still going on, in a way that undermines any kind of national pride. And basically in our schools, they teach our children that the empire was evil, that England was evil, and Christianity was evil, and white men are evil, and this
And you've got to give
breaks
back the
down.
Chagos Islands.
Yeah, I don't know about Chagos Islands. Go on, you talk about Chagos.
No, go on, carry on.
Yeah, so ultimately it breaks down that sort of national pride, and I think that it's contingent on successful societies, contingent on these things, isn't it? And we have to have a joint identity. We have to know what that identity is, and that has to be based in our history and a pride of what we've achieved as a society and a community. And I think that this is one of those things, one of those Chesterton's Gate things, where they've taken it down and they have nothing to replace it with, and no idea really of the great work that the Gate was doing there in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything's ideological. I mentioned the Chagos Islands. I won't get into that, though some of you may have noticed Pope Leo
Oh, God.
stepped in, which from a British perspective is slightly uncomfortable. So the Chagos Islands have belonged to the UK since 1815, and you see there back in May, Starmer struck this deal with Mauritius, but in doing so, he used international law as a fig leaf for an ideological choice, which you so often see with Starmer. So essentially, he struck a deal which is to give the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, so that Mauritius can have the Chagos Islands, and we have the privilege of buying back the military base, access to the military base. And Keir Starmer at the time was saying, we have to do this, we simply have to do this. If we don't do this, then we'll be forced to do it by international law. But none of that stacks up. And it became apparent that actually this was ideological. And the problem with it, from a UK, I don't want to make this political, but the problem with it is this has come after a Labour government have cancelled winter fuel payments, have put family farm tax up. I mean, we've had farmers committing suicide because they can't afford it. We've had boys and girls schools amalgamated, closed down, Catholic schools as well, because they can't afford the VAT on schools. There's been a jobs tax that's hit small businesses. And when we say that we've struck a deal over the Chagos Islands, as if this money appears out of thin air. This is our money. This is the taxpayers' money. So we don't have it. So this is coming out of the defence budget. So there are all kinds of problems with this deal, which was also, most importantly, given the Pope's comments, was a deal that was struck in secret without contribution from the Chagossians, many of whom are actually against the deal and believe that they'll be worse off in Mauritian hands under Mauritius. So one of the big things that the Pope is commenting on is the right for resettling the Chagossians. But interestingly, and I don't know the level of knowledge, I mean, I don't want to assume anything, but that Pope Leo has about the deal. Obviously, he's saying kind and compassionate and caring things, but the deal that was struck by Starmer doesn't even require Mauritius to resettle the Chagossians. There's no requirement. So they have a right, they can do it, they may do it, but there's no compulsion to do it. And so now we have a deal where it's a humiliation for Britain, it's a humiliation for the UK, where we've got the privilege of paying billions out of our tax budget to use a Anglo-American military base that we already have owned for hundreds of years, and it's just because of some ideological and political grandstanding, which is very Starmer, and we see it time and again. And his arguments about international law just don't stack up. So, in my humble opinion, I think it's probably an area best left uncommented on, and certainly to continue praying, obviously, about the situation. But I just think, wonderful as Pope Leo is, it was perhaps.
Well, there are positive things, and we're not saying, look, we're not here to be fanboys about it or anything like that. If there's something problematic, we'll call it out as well, won't we, Catherine? But
Yeah.
At the moment, it's nice to shine some light on some of the positive things that he's done. And I'm concerned about this. I didn't really understand why he felt the need to comment on the Chagos Island thing myself. So I totally
quite, yeah. I don't know the details, but he might have been somewhat. He'd had a visit from some Chagossians and face to face, and you're put in that situation and you're asked to comment, this is our home, and without, it could have been a throwaway comment. It may not have been intended for such public consumption, but obviously it's been leapt upon. So there we are. That's another situation that we've noticed this week's come out of the Vatican. Anyway, Alan, you've brought up a question from Alan.
Yeah, well, that sort of caught my eye from Alan there. Over the years, I've had the course to attend the Baptist church. One thing that was instantly noticed was their warmth of welcome and fellowship. Sadly, not so for many. I suppose that's, I don't know, Catholics. But anyway, great. It's a great point, Alan. But there's pros and cons. Now, I've got a really good friend who is was an Anglican priest, and he just got to the point with his Anglicanism where he was like, I can't support this anymore. And he quit his job as a priest and started going to the Catholic Church. And he just pop in at the back of our church and just sit in the pew. And, he was sort of under all kinds of pressure because of the decisions that he'd made. He ended up getting a job as a teacher, running an RE department in a grammar school, did extremely well, he's a great guy and is now a wonderful Catholic. But he puts a lot of his conversion through to the fact that he was just allowed to come in and experience the Mass and not be bothered, if you know what I mean. And also in the Baptist group that I'm involved with, one of the guys who comes is a doctor, Andrew, and he often says that he really doesn't like the sort of friendly, like the pretend banter. I wouldn't really put it like that. It's a community and they're all having, but I think he feels after that solemn time of worship that he just wants to reflect on scripture or whatever, and instead he's sort of forced into these conversations with people he doesn't know or whatever. So I think I've often thought that, Alan, like, why are we not more welcoming? And obviously we have, pardon me, welcomers and stuff at some parishes, but there are pros and cons as well. And what are you going to mass for? Are you going to be congratulated on how holy and wonderful you are for going to mass? Or are you going to mass to worship our Lord and Saviour, in the most holy sacrifice? And if you kind of got that attitude as you go in, I don't know, it doesn't really matter what anyone else is doing. You're just going in for that incredible purpose, aren't you? So what do you think, Catherine?
Yeah, I agree. I think you've brought it back to tell us again that what is the purpose of our going? And I think I often hear my dad, who goes to a parish where there's lots of elderly. He's a young buck of 91 years old, and he goes and he's in the choir, and there's lots of nice things going on in the hall afterwards, and they have cups of tea and everything, and that's lovely. But that isn't ultimately why we go to mass. So I think it's good to be welcoming. And I'm at a wonderful parish, and I think sometimes I'm a bit spoiled because we have a beautifully welcoming parish with lots of wonderful events that has both the TLM and the Novus Ordo, and manages that really well and has a great community. But I know some people just feel alienated, and so it's important to be welcomed, but not to say, if I'm not welcome, then it's not worth going. It's a bit like turning your back. Oh, if Pope Francis is a bad Pope, I'm not going to be a Catholic anymore. We have to remember the reasons why these things matter, but also hope for, that we can get through the passion that obviously we struggle through in our lives and the church struggles through.
There's another one
I hope
here.
I answered that all right. Given that I saw, because I'm listening to you, I'm making notes, I'm seeing what people are saying, and I'm thinking, oh gosh, have I caught? I haven't repeated what you've just said. Go on.
Oh, well, this is interesting from another Bennett. I think all your family are on. I don't know.
Yes, Bruce. Bruce. We met Bruce at one of our retreats, but yeah, we've got all the Bennetts.
I wonder what you're talking about, Bruce. Like, are you talking about, like, there's Montanism, which was founded by Montanus, he was a convert to Christianity about 156, like in the 2nd century. And it's a sort of a heresy from Phrygia, which sometimes is called New Prophecy. They believe that they are experiencing this new outpouring of the Holy Spirit, which surpassed the authority of bishops. So but I doubt you're talking about that. So I think you might mean ultramonatism, which is the idea that, more Roman than Rome. Like, the ultramontanists are people who take the authority of the Pope. I don't know. You'd have to clarify it.
So, like, Opus Dei are often criticised for being ultramontane.
Yeah.
This idea that is that, we're not sure if that's what you mean, or Montanism as a heresy, which, well, anyway, yeah, I'm not sure. But yeah, maybe Mark can get clarification on that. Just bringing up another couple of comments we've got here, that Pope Francis lacked Leo's warmth, which made his compassion babble worse because there wasn't Leo's warmth. I think it has been noticed. There's some really lovely footage of Pope Leo and him saying mass, and there's definitely, just on that level, that sort of warmth, as you say it. And Kieran, our friend Kieran, hello. Oh, I'm just sorry, we're competing. Right. Kieran has said there needs to be a balance between reverence and a sense of community, but also that there's a lot of lonely people out there, and that's absolutely true.
Yeah,
you need to be able to have that reverence.
The church needs to be a community, doesn't it? So there is.
And interestingly, we had a chat with a friend of ours who went to seminary and ended up leaving and getting married, and he's quite open about this. I think he's spoken on a few podcasts about it, and about how generally the priests, the seminarians were left that sort of flailing around, and this pastoral need that is sometimes lacking both for lay people and in seminaries, this true pastoral support that is needed is true. Kieran, yes, there needs to be a balance. You pulled up someone else just as I was.
Just that comment. It's a good comment there from Paul Priest, who's saying that do it after Mass. Don't do it before Mass.
Yeah.
Do it after Mass. I think that's a really good idea. I think we have that. I don't know how many people take advantage of it. I didn't put that.
Yeah, we're all after Mass. Yeah, it's true. Don't think you need anything in Mass. There's also, it's really interesting. We've been in France, as I said, and I went to a really uncomfortable Novus Ordo Mass while I was there, and it was really apparent how there was chit chat, there was chatter, there was catching up with each other, or even people on their phones and having phone calls, and you really notice it. This is not the place to be standing around socialising. Did you bring that up, Mark, Mr. B?
I thought you did. No, I didn't. But it's a good point, isn't it? Boys do, like, that's the whole point of the altar serving thing, Mr. B, is that you're introducing boys to what goes on at the most intimate level in the Mass, in the hope that they'll fall in love with it and feel the vocation to be priests themselves. So,
yeah, good. Thank you. Leonie agrees about girl altar servers. Leonie, good to see you here. Agree about girl altar servers impacting on vocations. Same with female extraordinary ministers. I'm discerning on what to do as I'm an EMHC in my parish, pondering on ways of explaining this. A good point. And actually, we've had a few comments today coming in, Mark, saying variously, my priest did a great homily, and should I thank him for that? Should I sort of talk to him about it and say I appreciate it? Or my priest allows girl altar servers. Should we challenge the priest on this? What's your view on your feedback, as it were, as a parishioner, to things that you think are poor decisions by the priest, or things well done?
Yeah, it's really difficult, isn't it? And a lot of it depends on how open your parish priest is to that sort of discussion. It is kind of subjective. It depends. Some parish priests they want your feedback, and there's always a bit of a tension, especially if you have a regular change of priest. A new one comes in and they tend to want to sort of assert their own individualism on the parish. And there's usually a little bit of friction until everyone gets used to it. But generally speaking, I think, it shouldn't be like this, but we've got to this situation where you need to discern a good parish, that it's not the way that it used to be where your parish was your parish. I think it's much more important that you're spiritually fed. And there's such a diversity in the kind of liturgy and catechesis available from different Catholic churches. Again, that is not right. That's not how it should be. It should be the universal church. We're united by our creed, by our cult, by our, what we teach and what we believe should be the same, should be based on the catechism, etc. But that isn't the case in reality, and you've got lots of sort of subjective opinions out there. And so you need to abandon the bad ones and follow the good ones. And things, I think it's a brilliant question, the Eucharistic minister thing, because it took me a long while to sort of, I think when I was studying, I started looking at, extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion, thinking, what's that all about? Because, okay, there's two ways of looking at this. One is that it doesn't matter who's giving it out. It is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of our Lord Jesus Christ, right? So that's what you're receiving. But at the same time, the priest distributes the Blessed Sacrament, body, blood, soul, and divinity, and he does that in persona Christi, as an alter Christus, as Jesus feeding his flock. And he is the one who has his hands are consecrated in order to do that. And so I think that one of the things that extraordinary ministers does is, again, diminishes the value of the priesthood. It makes it like, the laity are the same as priests. You know,
Yeah.
it makes it so that we can all do that job. There's nothing special about it. And this is all fed into the problem of vocations, I think, in a very real way. The other thing it does is create all kinds of weirdness with lay people coming up to extraordinary ministers for blessings and all kinds
Yeah.
of nonsense like that. I mean, basically, it's the same thing as we were talking about earlier. It's it loses its didactic nature. You know, it loses its ability to teach, becomes confused. And so, the best way to deal with this, in my experience, is if there is an extraordinary minister of Holy Communion, I probably very naughtily call them extraordinary monsters of Holy
I was
Communion.
going to say, I think that's the first time I've heard you say, really respectfully, Mark, Eucharistic ministers on your best behaviour. It's like, he's never said that.
Yeah, so I think the best thing to do is to, just ignore them and go to the priest, and that's what I always try and do,
Yeah,
because
we
it's,
always do.
you've got to go to the priest for Holy Communion. I think it's really important, and I think the extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion. If you read the documents of Vatican II, the idea of it was, like, in an extremely rare situation in Pakistan where they have mass once every 5 years and 10,000 people turn up, and there's no way that a priest or 5 priests could give
Yeah,
Holy
it was
Communion to everyone.
extraordinary, in other
It's
words.
an extraordinary situation, but it's turned into, oh, we have to have 4
Commonplace.
extraordinary ministers at every mass or whatever, and that's
Yeah.
that's destroying the liturgy. I'm afraid that's really damaging the liturgy, and it's a practice that we
Yeah.
need to stop.
We do. And I've even seen Mark a couple of years ago, and this was shortly before we made that move, which we have done now to the TLM, where we only have priests anyway, but where a priest sat, and I'm not kidding, like this, because one too many extraordinary ministers came up to distribute communion and sat literally, some twiddling, looking around. I mean, I can almost not believe, and this is actually a seriously worrying thing. And as I said before, and I know it will upset some people, it does give me some sympathy with my friends who exclusively attend the TLM and say they have real concerns about some of the practices at some of the masses that they would otherwise go to with the Novus Ordo. I think you were right as well when you said something like abandon, just go, because to some extent, it's like this reporting of huge crowds at some of the more reverent liturgies, and then other ones that are a bit ridiculous in the way they do things are just tiny congregations, tiny aging congregations. And I think to some extent, like, rather than admonish the priest, who of course we still recognize his authority and we don't want to tell him how to, but rather than that, just like, sort of, it's a bit like lead with your feet, that we'll go to the good shepherds who will feed us, and then the ones who are not nourishing the sheep will find that they have no flock. So it's kind of happened that way, rather than sort of wagging fingers and saying you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Maybe that brings us naturally, if you've got a minute, I know maybe you want to go to another question, but there was a brilliant question came into us via the email about discomfort in church with some public sin. So, for example, you're in your parish, you're at mass, and you see a man sitting with his ostensibly gay so-called husband, unashamedly presenting himself for communion and so on. And how does one manage that? How does one cope with that public nature of that public sin at mass? Do you want to say something about that, Mark, since it's something that was emailed in?
Well, I think it's really difficult, isn't it? Because your first, like, in all compassion and from a pastoral perspective, your first instinct is to say, who cast the first stone, and like, you don't know what their situation is. You can't judge what conversations those people have had with the priest, whether they're abstaining from any sexual activity, whether they're in talks to try and straighten themselves. You just do not know what's going on. Okay, so that's one point. But at the same time, if it's a public ministry that they're involved in, that is bringing a scandal. Because if you look at 1 Corinthians, what does St. Paul say? He says that these things bar you from admission to heaven, that these are sins that bar you from admission to heaven. And therefore, if we've got a situation where you've got clergy who are turning a blind eye to that, that is extremely spiritually dangerous. If they're pretending that that doesn't matter, or saying, oh, that no longer is in place, that bit of scripture is no longer in place, that's extremely worrying. And it's also causing a great scandal. If it's causing a scandal to the public, it's pedagogical. It's teaching the people without explicitly teaching them that these things don't matter, that rule has been abrogated. And so it's a matter of great seriousness, I think, really. And what do you do as a layperson? I suppose you've got to take it to your parish priest and have a conversation, as awkward and difficult as that might be. And I mean, it might be that the parish priest didn't know, and he says, oh my goodness me, yeah, I'll have a chat with whatever their name is, and just in a pastoral way, and try and help them to find the right path. So, it's like, and what's Paul saying here? Pope for us to change it, make it automatic clerical suspension, please, knowingly allows communion to be given to her. Yeah, there you go. So the trouble is, we all know what canon law is, and in respect to this particular question, earlier on, I was saying, look, I can give you canon law. I can show you that it's wrong, that it's not what the church teaches. But we all know that the reality on the ground tends to be, as we've said already tonight, you could give lots of in different examples, in terms of altar servers, in terms of extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion. You can go to parishes where, as you said, Catherine, you've got the priest sits down and lay people give it. You've got this situation where lay people are blessing lay people, and like, what's that? What on earth are they doing? What do they think they're doing? And what do the people going up think they're getting from it? Because when a priest blesses you, he's blessing you with the authority of the church.
The authority,
that's why you want to be blessed by the priest. So it's just bizarre. It causes all kinds of confusion, doesn't it? So these are all things, but unless we draw attention to it, unless we are trying to be faithful to scripture, to what the church teaches, and we're prepared to sort of have those difficult conversations with our priests, and if it needs be our bishop, not saying that anyone's going to take any notice of you, but if you don't do it, then you're not doing what Jesus said, and go into the altar. Before you go to the altar, go and speak to your brother, and if he doesn't listen, then take it to the church, and that's what we've got to do.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I can't add to it. It's brilliant, Mark. Thank you. And we're certainly, the view isn't, though the pews are for sinless people. We know that. And of course, there is so much we can't know. There is a lot we can assume, but there is so much we can't know. So it's always about the public nature. I think that's where it becomes problematic, which is why we saw, why we see priests and bishops refusing communion to politicians who publicly support abortion or contraception or IVF or other things, homosexual coupleship. I can't even bring myself to say marriage, because it's just it doesn't mean anything. But there we are. Well, listen, we've got just a couple of minutes left for any last minute things you'd like us to bring up on the screen, any comments, last minute comments, any last minute questions, if we've got time. We've got a few exciting things coming up. Later this week, we're talking with Brian Holdsworth, for those of you who are familiar with him and his channel. And we're going to specifically begin by talking about a great video he's done recently on Canada, really. Some of the same problems that we're facing over here, and what it means to love your country, and whether we can love our country and both love our country and be critical of the running of our country. So lots of stuff there around immigration and other things. But he did a great video, and we'll talk about that as well as other things.
Well, and that sort of links in with the French thing that I did. Do you see the way that I'm thinking? It's like,
yeah, exactly.
Like, what like the video that Brian did was so good, because it was, look, Canada's a complete mess, and you look at what's going on in Canada, all the woke stuff that's been going on now for under Trudeau and one thing and another, and you think, how is the place still cohesive? How is it work? It's like madness, the truckers thing and all that. And basically, he did a video saying, look, it's a hot mess. It's a disaster. It's falling to bits. And, this is how it's falling to bits. And so it's the same as like the French thing where you're like, look, this place has been on this secular, atheistic joyride for, 300 years now. How's that affected the society? And you start, like, when you look at it, you see, oh my goodness me, they're in demographic winter. There are all kinds of cracks in society. I mean, please do read my article, guys. I think I gave it the most off-putting title and everything because it is about philosophy. But really, what I'm trying to say is, like, if you look at a society that's really open to everything and says, no, everything's equal and everything's, subjective, and what has it actually done? It's made a space for the most objective ideology to creep in and start dictating what everyone else would do, i.e. Islam. And they've got massive problems because Islam is sort of taking over and dictating, and there's all this fighting, and so it's really like if we make these spaces in our countries for, if we don't stand for anything, we fall for everything. That's basically the point, isn't it? And
Totally.
just looking at the philosophy of that, I think is quite interesting because you can trace the way that our thinking has led us to this position, and it's worth doing that. It's worth understanding. It's not happened in a vacuum. And please God, that's what I'm hoping we'll be able to talk to Brian about, because he's really good on that sort of thing,
Yeah. So we'll talk with Brian a bit later this week and have a couple of good interviews lined up next week. So we're back from our holidays and it's all to play for. We'll be meeting and chatting again soon. We're also going to meet. We'll be putting up a little thumbnail for you to give you an indication of the time. And we will meet. Do visit our website, catholicunscripted.com, and pick up a subscription and join us in prayer, because we'll be meeting daily to pray the rosary. So we'd love you to join us. So look out for that on our website, catholicunscripted.com. We need to up our prayers together. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for supporting us. And we look forward to seeing you, joining you, hearing from you, and being in touch next Tuesday. Don't even know the date. Are we in September next Tuesday? Don't know. Next Tuesday, whatever next Tuesday is. I think it might be the 2nd of September.
Like yeah.
There we are. 2nd of September, next Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. Thanks for joining us until then. Oh, by the way, we've got a couple of questions, but it's too late to answer them. So we'll bring them over to next week, including, we might kick off with this, your favourite philosopher or theologian. So that might be a good way to start. We'll see you then. Thanks for watching. I'm Catherine Bennett.
And I'm Mark Lambert.